Alright, what's up everybody? So, I had a pretty busy weekend, so I'm sure you'll forgive me for uploading on a Monday for once. That being said, obviously we are in March right now, which means it's Resident Evil month. Resident Evil 4 is going to be releasing in a couple of weeks from now. Last week we actually had new gameplay released. I saw that in total we probably have about like 35 minutes of footage already. There's going to be a demo still coming up apparently as well. And yeah, what can I say? I mean, I'm excited as hell, right? I feel like Resident Evil is one of those series that recently has managed to just climb its way up to basically becoming one of my favorite series that I can rely on. You know, I can rely on it because of its consistency, because of its... It's interesting because normally I'd be inclined to think that a series being formulaic, quote unquote, is a bad thing. And I think we all do, because you automatically start thinking about, you know, the typical open world games that keep following the same formula, right? Or, yeah, any type of other, like a first-person shooter, like a Call of Duty series with the yearly installment. Resident Evil is technically doing a very similar thing, but I think it still manages to stand out. And why? Well, simply for the reason that it's doing what we all long for, I think, from most video games, especially my viewers and myself, is that it's going for the linear approach. It's going for the slick presentation, the original settings, the level design that's constantly creative and keeps you moving from one area to the next, where it's not like your open world game where no matter where exactly you're doing a certain quest, it kind of feels like you're constantly in the same environment anyway, right? Yeah, that being said, I also feel like this constant switching between, on one hand, doing remakes of the older, more classic games, and then having a couple new installments, obviously, as well, with 7 and Village, that try to kind of do their own thing in a first-person perspective with different characters. Again, it's just enough switching around to make it feel fresh every single time, and for that, I can only really commend it. Now, I obviously have my personal favorites. I have, you know, games that stick out to me a little bit more. I gotta say also that looking at the Resident Evil 4 remake right now, it's probably like the ultimate climax of this crazy streak that the franchise has been on, because Resident Evil 4 is, you know, clearly seen as perhaps even the pinnacle of the series, the installment where, you know, the series was brought to a whole new level. It's the first time that they introduced a third-person gameplay and everything like that, right? And Resident Evil 4 is not a game that I myself have actually ever played. I always knew that this remake was going to be coming eventually, and therefore I kind of held off. Being introduced relatively recently to the series, I did go back to play some of the older installments, like for example 5 and 6. But yeah, Resident Evil 4, I knew that after the 3 remakes, surely they were going to probably follow it up with 4 as well. That's what everybody was already speculating about, and so now it's coming, and it'll be the perfect opportunity for me. But yeah, like I said, when it comes to personal taste, I'm looking at the gameplay that's presented, and it looks, you know, just as good as all the other games that we've recently been playing. But at the same time, setting-wise, and, you know, Leon as a character, it's not even necessarily the one that seems the most appealing to me right now, but that's just me saying this with the complete caveat of I've never actually played Resident Evil 4 itself, and so I'm going in with an open mind as always, and I'm looking forward very much to seeing where it's going to ultimately end up in my own list of favorite Resident Evil games. Yeah, that being said, it's gonna be interesting, because as I just brought up already, Resident Evil 4's remake will probably serve kind of as the climax of this streak of both remakes and original games that we've gotten in this series. The question is, where do we go from here, right? Because I think as far as the remakes go, there obviously isn't too much room anymore as far as what you can cover. The 5 and 6 installments weren't received as well as any of the previous ones. You know, some people are speculating about, oh, that could be a Code Veronica remake, or you've got Resident Evil 0, but yeah, all of those installments, they're not, they don't seem as much of a home run in advance already as 2, 3, and 4 clearly did, you know, before that. So from here on out, I feel like we're kind of treading uncharted waters when it comes to the series, and that's going to be very interesting to see. Yeah, because let's first talk about the mainline series. I myself was a massive fan of especially Resident Evil 7. I thought it was such an amazing new direction for the series to go into. You know, not just going with that first-person perspective, which actually allowed it to feel obviously a lot more scary, first of all, but also, you know, it's funny because I see people complaining about Ethan as a character, and I actually really liked his addition. I liked the fact that you kind of felt like you could relate to him more in the situation that he found himself in. Basically looking for his girlfriend and then, you know, getting trapped into this house with an insanely creepy family surrounding him there. He felt entirely lost and hopeless. And I feel like the first person perspective really helped sell that to you. Clearly there were some issues with the gameplay, there were issues with the lack of variety in enemy types, you know, with you almost only fighting the molded, for example, and I'll give people, you know, entirely those criticisms, right? They weren't exactly wrong when saying any of that, but Resident Evil 7 also stepped away from the campiness, I feel, that, you know, the previous installments, yeah, were inclined to take. And that's something that I very much appreciated. It felt grounded. It felt like a mystery you truly wanted to uncover. Now, sure, by the end of it, it still revealed a couple of very over-the-top twists, I guess. And clearly we're dealing with a supernatural situation in the first place, so it's not like that's a big problem. But again, it was just grounded enough for me to really appreciate it for what it was. And I feel like that's actually a mistake that Village ended up making, is that Village just became too over the top for my taste. Now, I still really liked Village as a game on its own as well. I think Village very much improved on the gameplay aspect, where I just talked about 7 kind of under-delivering. Village was very fun to play. The setting was great. I loved all the different bosses that they had as well, right? I mean, there was Lady Dimitrescu, which nobody could stop talking about, but there were also a couple other ones. I remember that creepy doll, for which I forget the name right now, but holy shit, that was an absolutely haunting section. And then, yeah, you know, introducing the werewolves and the large amount of enemy types that you had in that game overall. It was a really fantastic addition. It's interesting because I think Village actually started off as being a different game, right? I think people at the time said it was supposed to be Revelations 3 that they decided to turn into Resident Evil 8, which makes sense to me because it still felt like a direction they just took Resident Evil in after 7 that I kind of hadn't seen coming, while still keeping, you know, its protagonist with Ethan, for example, right? And Mia was still there, Chris, yeah, obviously helping you out as well. But the story honestly became just a bit too over the top for my liking again. And where I had felt like I could relate so much to Ethan as a character in 7, and let me just call out an example that's still stuck in my head as far as like, oh my god, I feel for this guy right now, is that in 7, basically this happens in the first hour or two, I think, right? You start off and Ethan is realizing the situation that he's finding himself in with this, you know, family that he's been introduced to at this point in time. He had the dinner scene and stuff like that. And suddenly he finds the cop showing up at the house, right? There's the cop that shows up, looks with a flashlight into the house. Ethan sees him and is super relieved to find him there, right? And he's literally telling him about it. He's going, there's a family in this house trying to fucking kill me, and he's going completely nuts. And you can just feel the desperation in his voice. I don't know, but it's that emotion that he was still showing as a character, don't get me wrong, in 8, but then his motivation and his line of thinking didn't even really feel natural anymore. Because in 8, you immediately start off with Mia getting killed, right? And then you somehow end up in the village and you're trying to find out what the hell is happening and why your kid is suddenly missing this and that. It's a large mystery that doesn't even really make sense. I mean, you don't even understand how you ended up here in the first place. It's not something that Ethan decided by himself or something like he did in 7. But then I recall, and there's going to be a slight spoiler warning here, of course, that about halfway or maybe 3/4 of the way through the game, suddenly Chris finally reveals to you what's actually going on. And it's the fact that Mia never got killed in the first place, but it was this this end boss, Lady Miranda, I think it was, who turns out to kind of be a shapeshifter, and she had turned into your wife in the very opening scene of the game. And so what you actually saw was her getting shot, but then still actually making it out. Yeah, and what happened to your wife is kind of unclear at that point. And Ethan doesn't even ask about the situation of his wife. He just moves on and he's like, okay, I'm gonna kill that bitch. Without asking himself in the first place, like, where the hell his wife is at then, right? It's like, it's all these little details about it that didn't really make sense to me anymore. Resident Evil Village felt more like a video game. And that's, you know, obviously it is a video game, so don't get me wrong. I don't mean to say that it needs to be more than that. I'm just saying that from a story perspective, I liked the grounded approach that 7 started to take, and 8 kind of seems to have gone back to the roots, which, you know, is probably a choice that many others will be fine with, but for me, it was definitely what I was a little bit underwhelmed by, even if I still ended up liking the game on its own a lot. So for Resident Evil 9, it'll surely be interesting to see what direction they end up taking it in. Like I said, Ethan's story has been closed off with Resident Evil Village. There isn't really anything set in stone right now as far as what exactly they're gonna be doing with a 9th game. They could be keeping the first-person perspective. They could be keeping or they could be going back, I guess, to the third-person perspective, which a lot of people do seem to prefer. Again, for me, I kind of go back and forth because I see the advantages in both of them. I will say that maybe another area in which I feel like the Resident Evil series kind of lacks is character development. So, you know, like what you usually find is that, and it makes sense because these are horror games, and so especially in the latest entries, they wanted you to play on your own a lot, right? Whereas some of the old school games, you did have companions, which usually, you know, in 5 and 6, for example, took away pretty massively from the horror aspect in that case as well. And this is why it can certainly be difficult to find exactly what the right balance is in that regard. But I think that when you do end up featuring companion characters, there's growth in the relationship that you can develop there, right? And I think when we look at most of the story-driven games, think especially about all the PlayStation productions we've been seeing as of late, you know, people don't seem to understand that there is a reason why every single one of them seems to be focusing now on having 2 characters basically as your protagonist, right? Whether it's Kratos and Atreus, or it's Joel and Ellie, or it's Drake and Sully. No matter what, there's a reason for that, Chloe and Nadine. It's because they can develop the relationship there, and you feel like you're actually making progress through the adventure. Your characters are changing, and they are adapting to each other, right? And this is, yeah, just adds another dimension to the game, which we've, in all fairness, seen Resident Evil do plenty of times before, right? Resident Evil 2 with Leon and Claire, Resident Evil 3 with Jill and Carlos. Some of the later ones that weren't as much horror installments anymore, you know, 5 and 6 that I'm obviously thinking about. But again, it's something that 7 and 8 haven't really been doing as much anymore, and so I'd like to see, you know, a new mainline installment have a go at this again, because I feel like even with 2 and 3 Remake, there just wasn't really enough time for those relationships to get to develop. You know, you don't spend as much time actually Leon, for example, he kept running into Claire, but it's not really like he gets to, you know, be together with her in the game itself all that much, right? And I understand there that they had to stick to, you know, they had to stick to the script as far as this is how it played out in the original games as well, and the same kind of goes for Resident Evil 3. But like I said, the new mainline installment will have an opportunity here to revisit that and, you know, basically have a go at it and see how it performs. So that's what I'm certainly looking forward to if it decides to go in that direction. Yeah, other than that, guys, I don't really think there is much else for me to say other than, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what the future for this franchise holds. From a gameplay perspective, I couldn't be more happy with how satisfying the combat always feels. You know, the Resident Evil engine continues to be one of the best engines out there, not just from a graphical point of view, but also performance. Like, these games play silky smooth, and there's nothing you can complain about in that regard. The settings, they continue to be original. I really liked what they did with Resident Evil Village in that regard, being so different from 7. The 2, 3, and 4 remakes have been very nice distractions from that in between, and it'll be interesting to see if they do continue on with the remake path then or not, because again, which installments are you going to pick? I don't really think there's too many options anymore in that regard, so yeah, guys, let me know in the comments what you feel like the future of Resident Evil is gonna be looking like. What's been your personal favorite, you know, like, installment that's come out recently? I gotta say, for me, yeah, I can quickly still go over that, right? But like I said, 7 to me is the one that sticks out the most, just because I was so into the setting. It was by far the scariest game, and don't get me wrong, out of all the ones, I probably enjoyed playing it the least, because it seriously scared the shit out of me. But that being said, it's like, I don't know, it's like taking a cold shower. It's like just doing something you know you're not gonna enjoy, but you're doing it for the challenge, right? You're doing it because you're trying to step out of your comfort zone. That's what Resident Evil 7 was for me, and it's probably why it sticks in my memory as much as it has. Yeah, there's the 2 and 3 remakes, which came afterwards, of course, and even there, it's interesting because, you know, 3 wasn't as well received, but for me, that one I also have a kind of personal weak spot for, because it's probably the Resident Evil game that I had the best, you know, time playing, as somebody who, I'm not gonna lie about it, is really bad when it comes to horror titles in general, and just gets, yeah, I don't know, but these games scare the shit out of me. I really enjoyed Jill's character, and I do hope that she does eventually get to come back in a mainline game as well. You know, that's something that people are obviously speculating about a lot. Which characters from past entries are we going to be able to ever see back and greet in, you know, in the series? It would be very cool to see Jill come back. You know, that's how I feel about it, at least right now. But yeah, man, honestly, I like all of them for different reasons, and that's what's so great about the Resident Evil series in general. There's a lot of variety for as much of a formulaic game as it ultimately is, and so that's basically where I currently stand. But like I said, guys, in the comments, let me know, what are you looking forward to from the series? What's been your favorite game that's come out as of late? Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, of course, as I'll continue to be bringing you videos on, you know, the latest gaming topics on a weekly basis. And then with that being said, I want to thank you all a lot for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you back in the next video.